Good morning and thank you for joining us on Cheche, the show where opinion counts. I'm Hussein Mohammed sitting in for Udwa Kamimo. We are 8 months away to the general election and already concerns are being raised by the government and specifically President Uhuru Kenyatta that foreign interests are funding non-governmental organizations with a view to influence the outcome of next year's general election. Something that once again seems to put the Jubilee government and foreign agencies and the civil society on a collision course. This has been discounted by the bodies engaged in civic education. In studio tonight, this morning, we have Professor Peter Koganja on my immediate left, the CEO African Policy Institute, also a consultant for the UNDP. Harun Dubi is a lawyer and a member of the civil society. Mule Musau, National Coordinator, ILOG, or that is the Elections Observation Group. And of course, our very able panelists, Mutegi Jao and Charles Odembe. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, all of you. Talk to us on Twitter. The hashtag is Cheche. You can also reach us on 22422. And I'll read first two tweets here. Mwangi Wandaka says, the government should take this issue seriously and take the necessary steps before it is too late. And Anthony Wafula says it's actually the government that will disrupt the election and not the NGOs. Keep talking to us. I think I'll start with Harun Dubi from the civil society. First, what do you make from the president's remarks?
Very well, thank you, Hussein. I think the president's remarks are sorry and regrettable because the civil society in this country historically has played a very major role in doing what government ought to be doing. Whether it is in creation and transmission of knowledge, whether it is provision of infrastructure, provision of food, provision of services. Look at what happens when we have major disasters. We keep running towards the Red Cross, for instance. If you recall what happened around 2007 and 8, it is civil society which was most rapid in terms of helping those people who suffered the post-election violence. But if you go back to what the president said about elections, if you focus on elections alone, I do not understand the president in his remarks when he says that Kenyans know enough about voting and therefore are not do not require any education. You will recall the highest number of spoiled votes, which created some problem at the Supreme Court, happened in 2013, closest election to now. One would assume if there was no interference in terms of someone else spoiling somebody's vote, that he would then assume that there was great ignorance in terms of how to vote.
Yeah.
Secondly, there are new voters being registered now since that last election. People who have gotten to the age of 18 for the last 4 or 5 years, who will be first-time voters and require some education on how to vote. So I don't understand why the president says we know.
As Kenyans.
As Kenyans.
Okay.
But more important, as I conclude, is that the president is missing the point in terms of what civil society and education is when he thinks that the rest of society, be it government or private sector and others, and especially if you see how he engages with private sector, they are very important, but he doesn't see the role played by other sectors that he doesn't quite relate with. What I would like to say is that the biggest achievement civil society has brought to this country since independence is the enactment of the new constitution.
Okay. But he's worried, and I'll want Prof to come in next, we'll respond to this later, but he's worried about what he sees as sinister motives by the civil society. I mean, apart and aside from all these things that the civil society has been doing. You'll respond to that shortly.
Yes,
let me get Professor Kagwanja's first initial reaction to that statement by the president.
I think the problem with Kenyans is that we take concepts and don't interrogate them deeply and what they mean for our practice. Anybody who reads several books will come across something liberalism, or the idea that is driving this advocacy for democracy and so on. And democracy is good. It stabilizes societies. But democracy has its side effects. It is in many ways that you find this used in a number of ways to influence those who lead that society. that accusation was made against Hillary Clinton by Trump. I mean, against Trump by Hillary Clinton. So what Uhuru said is not new. And they said Putin is trying to influence. For them, they were very specific. It was not through money. It was through technology that you're going to tamper with this. So it's not an isolated kind of statement by the president. But the president identified, financing of politics. This time not through political parties, but through civil society. So I think what we need to do before we jump to criticizing him is to bring that on the table. I asked one of the people that I talked to and asked, what is the evidence of the president? And somebody said, already we are aware about $2 billion are in this country. That's what was said.
We'll actually get you those figures.
But the point, you get the figures, but the point, whether it's varied or unvaried, is the following. When Dubis talked about civil society have done this, you put Red Cross and so on, you are literally mixing dogs and hot dogs. These are two different things. Development-oriented civil society, like Red Cross and others, have never had any conflict with the governments, whether it is in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, or other. The organizations that have a problem with governments are human rights-oriented organizations. Reason being, they push an ideological position, not a developmental position. They push change that is ideologically potent, not the content of a change that is transformative in the way we talk about socio-economic, political, holistic. And therefore, those civil society organizations find themselves allied to, and I'm saying, I worked for the Kenya Human Rights Commission myself for many years.
Allied to?
Yeah.
Allied to?
By that time, we were allied to the opposition. Yes, we were.
This is the same civil society, and we'll fix it. But, Prof, they received, and they have been receiving such funds for development. This is specifically actually civic education. Where are you getting the sinister motives from? No, it is the decoding. I headed the constitutional process in this country, and we asked for money. We got money from UNDP to do civic education. And civic education was endorsed as part of the constitutional process. It was endorsed as a constitutional process. And money was provided to government and civil society organization and others, because the agenda required education on each and every element of the constitution. Which is in elections.
Professor Kakwanja, if Moi was the president during that time, would he have approved you getting money to do that constitution, which he didn't want? The constitution we approved, even during that time we did. But would the sitting government, which is not interested in changing the constitution, support that? You receive money to do the process? Moi did not oppose. We got money and he did not oppose.
Let's speak. Let me
first, of course, I totally support the position that Wakili has put forth in terms of the place of the civil society in the country. I think we know that there is a space which is not occupied or which is not taken care of by the state, by the government, so to speak, and there's also a space which is not picked up by the private sector, which is the other society that Ndubi was talking about. So that space is always there, and that's the space that the civil society usually occupies. As far as the statements which coming from the president are concerned, and I would want to be much more specific on the civic education. Again, a point has been put across. As an election observer, we've watched this over time. Yes. In terms of, we have new laws which are in this country. We have new practices in terms of how we conduct our elections, and you have the new voters who keep turning up for registration. You want this to be informed of the processes on how to be able to participate in this. What I would take, and now picking up from Prof, is that if there are any issues about funding to particular organizations which is inimical to the state's interests, I think we have a security apparatus, we have people who can be able to address that issue. But then, of course, you have to look at the objectives, because you don't want to confuse, and I like the statement he says about the hot dogs and the dogs. You don't want to confuse that society or civil society organizations which are actually doing some very, very good work, and there have been milestones and benchmarks which can be able, as our Wakil was talking about, there are things that the civil society has been able to return in this country in terms of moving it forward.
Okay.
And therefore you don't want that to be confused with the agenda of, well, there are a few people here and there who are doing this. I think the state can be able to...
One thing is actually very clear. One thing is very clear. From the President's statement, it was about civic education,
yes.
the election per se. So, I mean, without downplaying the issue of the dogs and the hot dogs, I would love that, Professor, maybe you tell us, to what influence, to what extent did you, as human rights organization, allied to the opposition then, influence
I think that is the wrong question for Professor. This misnomer about dogs and hot dogs is actually hogwash. Because the point is, the society is holistic. You cannot say that development is the ornaments we see as roads and buildings, but human rights is not important. The right to vote is a significant human right. The right to information is a significant human right. Without the right, without information, and without enjoying the right to express yourself, without the right to associate with others, without the right to share information with others, your right to existence is undermined. The right to food is undermined. The right to live is undermined. So that, Prof, when you start talking about dogs and hot dogs, the thing is, we start a practical problem. We deal with issues of human beings, live human beings who live a life. We start using big words like the hot dogs, and I don't know what hot dogs are, and dogs.
Dogs are...
No, you don't have to teach me now.
Dogs are dangerous canines. Hot dogs are quick snacks, that's all.
They are called man's best friend. They are not dangerous canines. I think, Prof, let me make my point. That it is dangerous for this country, for anyone to assume that governance or human rights kind of education is dangerous for the country, but development and infrastructure is the best. Actually, talking about foreign agencies or foreign influence, the president now belongs to a party called JP, Jubilee. When it was being launched, we saw a huge delegation of the Chinese Communist Party given official precedence at the launch. I am aware that the certain officials of that Jubilee have been to China as guests of the Communist Party to learn about political party organization. What more dangerous organization or foreign influence on our politics are you talking about than when people are asking, let us have support so that we as Kenyans have some modicum of level information and capacity to vote correctly, let alone making a political choice, but voting correctly. What problem do you have with that, Professor?
No, I have no problem. Don't personalize this. We are here to discuss ideas, and to be honest with you, I'm not in the government, so you can possibly...
You speak for it, though.
No, the government is
just
my
like
house.
You think we speak for opposition.
The government might be in my house, but I'm not in the government. I know what you are reading to. But on a more serious note,
don't speak like Buhari.
On a more serious note, let's look at it this way. When somebody speaks about something in such an important day as Jamhuri Day, that cannot be an idle politics. You have, as Kenyans, we must give the benefit of doubt and sit down and investigate what is ailing this person.
Who should investigate?
It is us.
Who should investigate? It's the same government that is saying this.
No, not the government. I'm talking about even civil society. We need to reflect before we speak and say, why is the president saying this and what might be behind it? We are jumping to explanations. When I talked about dogs and hot dogs, I have personally, I come from civil society. About 2 months ago.
You came from it.
Listen, no, I am in the civil, I head a civil society organization. I do. Chapter 73 of South African Companies Act. You hear that? So, and I have headed it for 10 years. And I have never left civil society. and I teach at the university. So I'm a professional in that sense, and I have never held a government position at any time, except the advisory consultancy job. Yes, that's the point. That's the point. So I'm very clear about, we are very clear about what we are doing. I wrote my PhD on civil society at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. That's what I was researching on. You never asked me what findings I found. We have two forms of civil society here. We have the blood and soil civil society organizations that identify with the ideals of this republic, and we have civil societies that we are calling evil society that doesn't care what they do. Because if this country burns, they go wherever they want.
And who allows them? Who allows them to operate in the country?
The most contentious issue in this country is the so-called Public Benefits Act. In Russia, they introduced a bill where if you are getting foreign funding for political purposes, as a human rights organization, as this and that, you go and register as an agent of a foreign organization. You register that. Then you are around to operate.
You approve of that?
I'm saying if you're getting funding to do anything,
you approve of that? That is
for political. If it is for political, you say because
who defines politics?
Let me finish first. Yeah.
When we talk about use the concept of partisanship, you were saying, I belong to a certain party of a certain ideological position. You are required to even in court, you talk about recusing yourself because you have interests. That's why in politics you do that. Development organizations, civil society organizations are not required to do that.
Okay, my question to you is, you say that we should, I don't know who exactly you mean when you say we should investigate.
As a country.
Who has the powers to investigate? Here is the president who's come out and said he's concerned that foreign interests may be influencing through these bodies the outcome of the 2017 election. He is the president, the leader of the government. And you're saying, from your own thesis and what you did, there's what you call, to quote you, evil and civil society.
That's a concept used.
That's what you're saying. The question is, if the government is saying all this is happening, should it just have been right for the government to say this body A, B, C, D is doing wrong?
After all, they did that with NGOs when they froze their accounts.
Now, I think what the president has done is to trigger debate. And we are going to debate it throughout, up to 2017.
But my fear, Hussein, is that what Prof says in terms of triggering debate may scuttle very good efforts in terms of educating Kenyans on exactly how they are supposed to participate in the next electoral process.
If the president's idea was to trigger debate, like Professor says, then you wonder what is the intention of the president towards the debate and what are his expectations on the outcome of that debate. But that said, and I'm particularly surprised at Professor's theory, when you go back to before independence, the Mau Mau, the Kenya African Union and others organized to change government. Not because the idea was just to change government, but was so that they can welcome good government and good governance for ourselves. And they did so not as an organized government approved institution, but as an effort of the independent citizens of Kenya to get freedom for themselves. What has changed? Where did we reach where we said government is the only that knows all good for Kenya, for citizens, and that if you have a different political opinion from those in government, because the ones in government are also engaged in politics, and when they get support from outside or wherever, it is to support their kind of politics. I'm not sure when you say that if you are engaged for you're in human rights for political purposes, then you should say so and recuse yourself from engaging in politics. It is an oxymoron.
No, is it not? It is very clear. When you are in Okoa, Kenya, which is identified as a political movement in support of a political formation, and you are officiating this, if you go and identify that civil society, then you are partisan. You are not told to disband and cease existing. You are told to just declare
partisan
that you are
what?
partisan interest. No, I'm saying you are partisan to...
There's a political alignment with the...
Yes.
There's a political alignment... Yes. Sorry, Charles. There's a political alignment. What Prof is saying, there's a political alignment with the core Kenya.
Yeah.
That is, you know, you're looking at it as the opposition. If there are some civil society
I hear
organizations there,
but let me say this.
he has a point.
We are probably... I hear his point, but we are probably trivializing now the role of civil society to a level of starting to engage. Are you supportive of Jubilee or CORD or another? The point is, there are civil society organizations who stand for good or governance, you may say, because there is also a qualitative debate as to good. I clearly recall the Institute for Education and Democracy, IED, when it was headed, the executive director was our deputy UN permanent Kokimuli. They helped KANU, as a civil society organization, independent but interested in good politics. Yes. They helped KANU to design its first strategic plan. President Uhuru now, but he was then chair of KANU, and he was happy to be helped by a civil society organization which was receiving funds from outside.
For governance purposes.
For purposes of entrenching good governance practices within the political party. Now, I do not know whether interests that are for the people of Kenya are defined by the agency that promotes those interests or are defined by government. Because the people in government mistake their own perception of good interests to be the best interests of the country, and that's why they think that either national interest, national interest or national security is necessarily their own definition.
All right. Charles was going to ask a question, but we'll do that.
Actually, it's been overtaken.
We'll do that after the break, but it's interesting, and Mutegi, I want you to come back with this after the break. The interest of the people, that's what he's talking about.
And the interest of the government.
And the interest of the government. All are still interests of the people of Kenya, isn't it? But still we have a coalition here. Keep talking to us. The hashtag on Twitter is Cheche. You can also text us on 22422. We're back after this break.